breakthrough is a moment in time. It's a moment when the impossible becomes possible, and you don't just think about it, but you act upon it. It's like you can have a concept that doesn't create a breakthrough. The breakthrough is when you get to the point where you actually are going to do something about it. You're going to stop smoking, or you're going to go lose those 25 pounds or whatever it is, and you start to make progress, and then you pull back and you get disappointed and get frustrated. But then there's some times where finally you hit this threshold. You hit this moment where your brain says, not another day, not an hour, and I'm losing this weight, I'm making this happen, and people create that breakthrough. And it can it's the difference between what triggers it versus what makes it possible. What triggers it is usually pain or massive inspiration. Trigger that finally made that happen, I'd ask your audience if they think it's something where they finally broke through, what was the trigger? Usually that moment, that day, you hit a threshold of, I can't take anymore, I'm changing, or something inspired you. You saw someone's possibly, if they can do it, I can do it as well. People that are most alive, regardless of the economics, are people that have found something that they really feel the motive is more than just themselves. We all know what it feels like when you're trying to do for something for someone you love, and you're not doing it as a trade, you're not trying to get something back, you're just doing it because it's what you're made for. And I always tell people motive does matter. That if you're just doing something for yourself, there's nothing wrong with that, because life supports whatever else supports life. If you're part of life and you're trying to do something that's going to make your life better, I think the universe, God, whatever proper term for you, whatever your belief system is, infinite intelligence gets connected to you and it gives you insights. But I think if you're trying to serve more than yourself, more life than just you, when things support more of life shows up to support you. That might sound kind of airy-fairy, but it's my experience. When you're trying to support your family, when suddenly I had 4 kids, 3 of them overnight, my life changed, my intellect changed, my abilities changed, because I was trying to serve something more than just me. When I started really focusing on how to serve a community, and then a country, and then humanity, as corny as it may sound, you get insights you won't get when you're just trying to somehow, make your labor happen or get the job done. So labor could be love, and it isn't for most people. Most people, I think, are unhappy in their life because they look at labor as work. They look at it as, why should I have to effort so much? And in my experience, effort is the reward. If you are doing something you love, it's there. So if you don't have it, you might say, Tony, that's all wonderful. You're in Fiji and you do what you love and I don't have that. Thanks so much for giving me the lecture. I'm not coming from that place. I'm coming from the place of saying you can discover something that you're really passionate about, but in order to do it, you got to get out of the story of what you can't do, and you got to put yourself on the line. I mean, so many people right now, this Labor Day, are out of work. And when you don't have the privilege to be able to work, you start realizing that work really is a privilege. And most of us know that 2/3 of the planet's living on $2 a day. So no matter how difficult our life may be, most of us, our worst challenge is somebody else's greatest dream. And I think it starts with the gratitude for what we already have. It starts with understanding that what's wrong is always available, but so is what's right. And if you and I can figure out what's right with what we do, if we can start where we are and enjoy that labor, everything changes. The difference between making it or not is psychology and skill. You need both. And honestly, skill is the smaller of the two. I'm gonna give you a ton of strategies this week. I'm gonna do psychology first, and you're gonna see why as this day goes by, because you're gonna discover when people stand up and we figure out what's the chokehold on their business, 80% of the time, it's gonna be their psychology. The chokehold on the growth of your business is the psychology and skills of the leader, period. That's it. And if we change those two things, skills too, marketing skills, financial intelligence, recruiting, training, all those things, we train those too. Don't get me wrong, we gotta do the skills also. But I could give you every skill. How many of you learned before that was invaluable from some source, a mentor, a coach, an event, a university, I don't know what, and you were excited about it, and then you never actually followed through? Who's done this before? Say, I. Listen, knowledge is not power. Execution trumps knowledge every day of the week. My goal is to make you execute. I can't make you, but I can get you where you tap into that part of yourself. And that shift is the most important shift. If we can take our work and think of work as being like a gift. I personally believe that one of the greatest gifts outside my love that I can give another human being is my labor. But there's 3 gifts of labor you might have within your nature, meaning you can master anything, but under stress, people tend to go back to their true nature. And there are 3 gifts of labor that you can give. One of those gifts we might call the gift of being an artist or a talent, or another word for it would be a truly skilled producer. Some people, the reason you know this is your gift is what you love to do is to create a product or service and deliver it to people, and you're enamored by that. The woman over here who is doing the work, if you recall, in hospice, she would be a perfect example of an artist. She's not in it, she wants to make money, don't get me wrong, but she would never trade the money for the impact. So when someone is in it as an artist, and by the way, most businesses are started by artists. There's somebody who was an amazing negotiator, an amazing fashion designer, amazing code writer. And they said, I work for this company and they don't do a good job for customers and I can do a better job. I don't work for them, and they start their own company thinking that the company is all driven just by the sales or the negotiation or the code or the fashion. But a company is much more complex than that, especially as it grows. So an artist is in it for the impact. And yes, they want to make money, don't get me wrong, but it's not the first thing and they won't trade it. When I talk to artists about selling their business, they look at me like I'm trying to sell their child. The second gift you might have is the gift of being a manager-leader. A manager-leader is someone who lives to manage people and processes. They love to figure out how to maximize a business by changing the gears, creating a new process, working with people. And those people love it. Now, they are not artists in that their talent or skill, they're not there delivering it directly to the client. They want to work on the people that are directly with them. They want to work on the system that makes this business work. And so they think it differently. They're inspired by different things. They make different decisions. Is one better or worse than the other? Yes or no? No, they're just different. And by the way, you might say I have both those skills. I bet you do, but they're not equal because they're different types of skills. So you might have them both, but there's one that is your true nature, that when things are going well, you're going to go back to it. When things are really up, you're going to go back to it. Under stress and under excitement, we return to our nature. By the way, a great company can't be great without great artists, talent, who really deliver extraordinary products or services. A company cannot maintain greatness and grow unless they have some great manager leaders who can run the process and the people. They're both critical components. The third choice of service, the true gift you can give, is that of an entrepreneur. And while most of you in this room would call yourself an entrepreneur, and you would be entrepreneurial, by this definition it's a little different. Most people think of an entrepreneur as anybody who starts multiple businesses. No, that's not true. Some artists start multiple businesses because they want to get all kinds of things for all kinds of people. Some managers want to do multiple businesses so they feel like they have multiple systems. But entrepreneurs in it for one thing, the juice of risk. They want to make money. And by the way, an entrepreneur, will they sell this business? Yes or no? For the right price, they'll sell anything. And their mindset is, sell it, I'll start another one. Sell it, I'll buy another one. But that's what makes it possible. What makes it last is a change in your emotions, or a change in your belief system, or a new strategy, right? You and I both know, because you're both strategists, the right strategy, hell, you can consume a book and remember more of it in 30 or 45 minutes than you did when you used to spend 10 days on the damn book, right? It's the right strategy, but you're not gonna find the strategy until it's a must for you and not a should, you know what I mean? Or it's that change in belief. It's like, okay, I've put up with this crap long enough, I'm better than this. There's something more in me that you finally find in yourself. Or you finally get pissed off enough, or you get excited enough to make that real change. And so what I've studied is, I like to take complex things and make them simple, because I found that, the more, when I was really young, I tried to make things more complex. I think to try to convince myself how smart I was, or other people, I don't know what, but it's stupid. Because complexity is the enemy of execution. And the only way your life changes or your business changes is execution. So it's like, how do you make it simple? And I started looking at all these, I've been doing this is my 45th year doing this. I started when I was 2, of course. And I started seeing these patterns all over the world, working with the greatest people on earth, athletes, business people, the most challenged people in prisons. Like, what are the common denominators in all these cultures? And I began to see there's 3 things you need for a breakthrough, but most of us do them in reverse order so we don't get the breakthrough. The number one thing most people do when they want to have a breakthrough, they want to change their body, want to change their finance, they look for a strategy, which makes common sense. That's what I used to do. But the problem is, strategy could be the problem, and maybe you need a better strategy, but that's not usually the real problem, right? Like, for example, 3/4 of America is overweight or obese. If we're the fattest humans in the history of the world, We all know COVID, other than age, the number one risk factor is obesity. That's number one. And yet, very few people do anything about it. And why is that? Is it because, the strategy for being fit and strong is so complex, or only the 1% know it, or it costs a fortune to do it? No, you have to be fighting not to see all the strategies to make your body physically better. They're around you everywhere. So you could have the wrong strategy. Like I remember years ago on the cover of Time magazine, they had the Atkins diet, and they said, I think it was 15% of Americans were doing it. Well, if you gotta pee on a stick so you don't get too acidic and your breath is that bad, it's pretty obvious that's not sustainable. So sometimes it's a strategy problem. But when you work for the how first and you've never figured it out, your emotions get in the way. It's the wrong sequence. It's like the dog bit Johnny, Johnny bit the dog. Same words, different experience if you're Johnny. So strategy naturally is where people go, but rarely do they change with that. What the real problem usually is the story they've developed. And a story is just code for all the things you told yourself over and over again until you believe them, right? There's an old language pattern that says, tell a lie big enough, loud enough, long enough, sooner or later people believe it. That was Hitler who said that. And so most of us are Hitler in our own mind. So it's not that they can't, what do people say? How come I can't lose weight? I can't lose weight because, I've tried everything. No, if you tried everything, you'd be fit, right? They didn't try everything. I've tried millions of things. Really, name them. Well, I've tried hundreds, name them. And then they'll tell you 3 stupid things that don't work that they did over and over again, right? So it's the story. I don't have a relationship because all the good ones are gone. The story is what'll keep you. Like I'm sure, Jim, you have so many great strategies you share with people. Haven't you had times when you give someone an answer right there in front of them and they just can't even see it, right? They don't believe it. Because the story is literally blinding them. In psychology, we call it a scotoma, a blind spot. But then there's one level deeper than even the story. And that's your state, the mental, emotional, physical state you're in. Because when you're in a low mental, emotional, physical state, you can have all the brain capacity in the world, but you're not going to use it. And so when you're in a lousy state, you come up with a lousy story and then no strategy works. It doesn't matter what it is. I don't know if you've ever noticed, have you ever gotten really angry at somebody and then suddenly you remember all the ways they've ever screwed you over, you've been upset with them, right? So the sequence in which we do things accelerates or decelerates or stops progress when it comes to a breakthrough. But for me, it's really slow it down, and everyone needs a compelling future. What do I mean by that? Anybody can deal with a tough today if they have a compelling tomorrow. But what's happened is there are a large number of people that after the first run of 2020, we were coming into January, and I remember that, and people are like, all right, now it's a new world, it's a new life, it's going to go great. And then, all of a sudden more people died in 2021 with vaccines and with all these details that we have. And so people are uncertain, and now we got Omicron, and people are making it like the Great Plague, when if you actually look at the science, the vast majority are showing it's more like a cold or a really gentle flu. But it doesn't matter, we're tracking everything now. If you imagine if we were tracking the flu constantly and where it was, we don't test everybody so we don't freak out all the time. So what are you gonna do to create a compelling future for yourself? What do you really want this year to be about, regardless of what's going on in the outside world? You might say, well, Tony, that's easy to say, but they're controlling my business or they're shutting me down here. You can move. You can make new choices. I know they're not easy ones, but you got to get to the point where you say, I won't settle for less than I can really do, be, share, create, and give in my life, for my family, for myself, for what I want for my life. There's a point we got to say enough is enough, and you got to start to take control. Example. Right now, you're an example that's growing and expanding, and you have a chance to have this be the most incredible life, but it won't be a life without challenge. And the challenges we're facing right now give you an opportunity to grow like very few generations. I'm sure you've heard of the Great Generation, the World War II generation. If you watch a great movie, if you read a great book, the size and the power of the hero, how much you become as a hero is defined by how tough an obstacle you face, how difficult is the villain, the opponent. And so sometimes when I've been through the toughest times of my life, one of the questions I've had to ask myself or note to myself is, I finally have a really worthy opponent. This is scaring the hell out of me, or this is challenging me, or this is making me crazy. But I also know in my gut and in my soul that if I can push through, it's just like you've done in these years. You've pushed through tough times, I'm sure, many of them. But as you push through those, you become more. And as you become more, something magical happens. You don't just grow, you expand in your spirit and your soul and your capacity and your skill. And all of a sudden, fear becomes less and less a part of you. It's one of the things I'm behind it. I have about a dozen really important things to me. Feeding people is most important to me. Yeah. Providing fresh water. I do that in India for 250,000 people a day. Personally, I'm going to get that to 1 million people in the next few years. Wow. It's just about infrastructure, freeing, boys and girls. Women are about 80% of them. I mean, there's a new child abducted every 30 seconds. There's 6 million people in slavery around the world. We've saved about 3,800 just in the last couple of years. I've gone on the operations myself undercover, but I work with Underground Railroad because they're former SEAL Team 6, CIA, FBI, and we teach the local government what to do to capture these people. So it's not just save some kids right now, but showing them what to do for the future. But I'm also, I'm involved with so many different things, and my answer is if I think it's core to humanity, then I'm interested. Food is, air is, I've planted 10 million trees in the last year and a half. I'm fortunate to have my own private jet, but I'm conscious of that. So it's like, how many trees does my whole lifestyle take? It's about 3,000 trees. So I said, I don't want to plant, 10 million. I said, screw it, I'll plant 100 million. So I planted 10 million already. I'm on course to do the 100 million, just like feeding 1 billion people. So it's the things that matter. That's what God's doing. But I do things spontaneously. I was in San Francisco and I read in the newspaper that while I'm there, I was there to see Mark Benioff. And I see that the toughest part of San Francisco is called the Tenderloin District. And there's these nuns there that feed the poorest of the poor. And they're being evicted. And it's one of the richest cities in the world, more billionaires there, tech billionaires than anyone, no one's doing anything. So I went over, knocked on the door, introduced myself, found out who the person was that was evicting him, called him up and said, look, I'm an owner too. You have the right to evict anybody, but do you really want to be the hated man in San Francisco? I said, why don't you let him stay 9 months? I'll get him out within 9 months. I'll pay you the additional rent. And I did, and then, the nuns, they're looking for a place to lease, and all of a sudden I get a call from Realtree because they're looking for a place to buy, and I called the nuns and said, you have some money I don't know about? God will provide, as they stare at me. So I bought them a place there, and my friend Mark Benioff then bought them a home to live in. So, I do things spontaneously. I love those things as well, but the secret to living is giving. I know it sounds corny, but I had a tough time in my life. I remember I was driving on the street in this 1968 Volkswagen. I was working so hard and I was so frustrated. Things weren't going the way I thought they should. And I was like, what's wrong? And then I pulled it to the side, and I still have today this written journal. I wrote, the secret to living is giving. I started to cry because I lost the giving mode. I've gotten into the business mode. And to me, like I said, business is a spiritual game. If you're focused on giving, if you're doing more for your client or customer than anybody else, you will dominate. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. And to me, that's not, I don't tell people to believe spiritually or religiously, but I believe prayer is a very useful thing. Reminding yourself you're not the center of the universe and asking for guidance and help and opportunities to do that. I personally believe that, but not everybody does, and I don't tell people they have to, but it starts there. But there's also, when you have a spiritual side of your life, there's a lot less anxiety because you believe there is something greater than yourself. Right. And then you do your part. Yeah. Like you said, I use a similar metaphor when I say it's, trusting God and tie up your camels, that type of thing, right? But what most people don't know is the power of their mind. So there's an entire last 2 chapters of the book. If no one reads anything else, I say, please read those 2 chapters, because if you do everything physically well, if you don't manage your mind and emotions, you'll get sick. If you're in a situation where, as an example, let's take, you've got $100,000 that you've saved, you're 35 years old, and you put it in the market and just leave it there and never add anything to it. If you leave it in the market and you're only being charged 1% in fees, at retirement 35 years later, you got $762,000 from that 100. Never added a dime, it grew that much. But if you pay 3% in fees, which is the average most people are paying, when you ask people what they're paying, they don't know, or they say 1%. Because when you hear about it, fees, let's say a mutual fund fee, you'll always hear 1%. That's the expense ratio. There are 17 other fees. So every 1% you overpay, 1% is the average. If you pay 2 or 3 and the average mutual fund is 3.12, sounds like nothing, 1 or 2%. Every 1% you overpay because of compounding means you lose a decade of income. So the person who paid 1% has $762,000. The person who paid 3% has $452,000, and they own the same stocks. It's just fees. So while we compound our interest, we also compound fees. So if you could save 3%, build it to 5, 10, 15, or you start with 10 or 15 and eventually get to 20. The best example I can give your viewers is that there's a gentleman who worked for UPS who literally never made more than $14,000 a year. You heard about him in the book. Yep. And when he retired, he had $70 million. And he gave away $35 million while he was alive. And the reason was, a friend of his set him aside and said, look, I'm gonna make you rich. He goes, I'm never gonna be rich. I make $14,000 a year. He goes, I'm gonna make you rich. I'm gonna make you rich later in life, and I'm gonna do it by a 20% tax to your business. And he goes, I make $14,000 a year. I can't live on 20% less. His friend said to him, if the IRS came and said that 20% more tax, you'd scream, you'd yell, and you'd pay it. And he said, but we're gonna pay it for you. And that 20% compounded generated $70 million. So for the people that are at home, the sooner you start, the better off you are, because compounding does it. I got an example in the book of a guy that starts at 19, he puts aside $300 a month. He stops at 27. So he does it for 8 years. He only puts in, I think it was $35,000.
Yep.
But it's $1 million by leaving in the market when he turns 65 and he stopped at 28. He has a best friend that starts at 28, invests his entire life, puts in $180,000, and he has less money at the end. The sooner you start, the better you are.
Yeah.